Welcome back to Dave's Movie Diary. Today I'm talking about a very interesting but challenging film called Orlando, released in 1992. I'm still trying to process this film, to be honest, from my watch last night. I have seen the film before. I saw it, I think, a couple of years after it was released. I saw it here on SBS one night when I was just looking around for something to watch, and this sounded different and interesting, which is something that always gets me. I'm always, even back then in my early 20s, I was drawn to films that were a bit different. Let me tell you, this film definitely fits the bill. I was quite amazed by the film the first time I watched it. I didn't really understand it. There were a few things in the film that that just blew me away, and I couldn't exactly remember what even. I did remember it had something to do with gender, and I was right there on that count on the rewatch. But it was just popped. Where did it popped up here on my movie watch list as something to check out. So I thought I'd circle back and see how I felt about the film 30 years later. When I started watching this film, I do have to admit that I thought, is this the right film to talk about on this podcast? Is it too unusual? Is it too out there? Too experimental? Would it sit alongside some of the other films that I've done here, which are a lot more mainstream? But then I thought about, what's this podcast actually about? It's just about revisiting films that I've watched, and some of them have challenged me. Some have confused me a bit, like this one. Some have made me look at myself and my attitudes and whether they've changed. And on all those counts, Orlando absolutely belongs. And is worth talking about. So I think the fact that I was unsure about it, that's probably exactly why it belongs here in this pod, in my opinion. So what's it about? Well, it's based on a novel by Virginia Woolf that she wrote in 1928. It begins in the court of Queen Elizabeth I in 1600, and Orlando, played by Tilda Swinton, the British actor. Orlando's a young aristocrat who catches the Queen's attention. Lord Orlando, I should state. And the Queen rewards Orlando with wealth, property, and one unusual command: never grow old. Well, Orlando takes that to heart and travels through centuries of British history. And at the heart of it is a search for love, that's for sure. But the character really experiences changing attitudes towards love and society and class and identity, but in particular gender. It's a groundbreaking idea, I think, and it must have caused a stir when it was written in 1928. Eventually Orlando wakes up as a woman, but internally they remain the same person. So the world changes around them. The body of Orlando changes. The expectations have definitely changed. But the question really becomes, is identity that's something within us, or is it something that society creates around us? That's what I think anyway. That's what I could get out of this. So there's a lot of subtext here. There's a lot going on underneath the surface. And when I saw this in the mid-90s, there's no wonder I came away confused. And looking back now, I can really understand why I struggle with parts of it. I can't believe I sort of sat through this, but I must have, because I remember being, like I said, completely dazzled by just the look of the film, but that I could recall something incredible happened. This is before the internet. If something confused you, you couldn't just search it up. You couldn't find out about it. I had no reference for this film, nothing to, I just watched it one night on TV and it just happened to me. I just sat with it, and I didn't know what to make of it, and I haven't seen it since. It hasn't popped up, um, and I didn't even obviously really fully understand the significance of Orlando's transformation at the time. I just didn't have enough context. I didn't have enough life experience. Um, I come from a simple background. I'm educated, but I hadn't really come across something that was asking these kinds of questions at the time. So 30 years on, I can appreciate, I think, what Sally Potter was doing in this film, with this film, and possibly even what Virginia Woolf was trying to achieve. I think. Look, there's a lot of holes in my take on this film, so that's my disclaimer from the get-go. I looked into Sally Potter a little bit, and it seems that she's a filmmaker who's always followed her own path, and started off doing some experimental cinema before moving into feature films. Um, IMDb said that this film took something like 9 years to make, and I didn't dig any further than that. But when I look at what's involved in this film, the sets for one thing, and just the ideas, and showing 4 centuries basically of transition, I can understand that. Sally Potter made another film called The Tango Lesson that came out in '97. I have seen that. I've got no memory of it. Another film called Yes in 2004 that I have somewhere on an old disc, but I've never seen it. I'll definitely look for that now. But looking through these titles, I don't recognize any of the other ones. Orlando's probably her most recognized film. Super ambitious. I've got to say that. I don't know how old Sally Potter was when she made this, but I'm thinking that she was still making films up to 2020 and beyond. So it's a stupendous effort. It's combining history and fantasy. There's some comedy in there, actually. Lots of philosophy and gender politics. Romance doesn't really fit into one category. It's an experience. Tilda Swinton. This was the first time I saw Tilda Swinton, and I've got to say that I think she's become one of cinema's most distinctive actors. She is androgynous, which works perfectly for this film, perfectly cast in the role as Orlando. When I looked into her career, I have seen her in quite a few things. I recently saw her in a movie called Julia, where she's an alcoholic, and she gets drawn into a hostage situation to get some money. Really good film. Check that one out if you can. Of course, she was in some really well-known films, including Michael Clayton. She's excellent in that. She's only got a small role as a high-class lawyer, and wow, she makes an impact in that film. She was in a film called The Deep End, which I vaguely recall. A film called We Need to Talk About Kevin. I haven't seen that one. Snowpiercer, I've definitely seen that, but I don't recall her part in that. Grand Budapest Hotel, yes. I loved that film when I saw it. I haven't seen it since. Suspiria, that's the remake of the Dario Argento film. I have seen that. That's an interesting watch. So look, she's been around. She's not one of those. She doesn't have the sort of face that is going to be top billing for many films that are mass appeal. She's got a really interesting face, and she can do lots of different things, a bit like Cate Blanchett, actually. Not a direct comparison, but similar kinds of energy and similar proficiency as an actor. She worked with a lot of great directors: Jim Jarmusch, Wes Anderson, Bong Joon-ho, Luca Guadagnino. I do think she's perfect because she doesn't have that traditional idea of masculinity and femininity. And this role does ask for a lot of ambiguity, and she brings it in spades. And the thing when I watched this again last night, I did recall being completely confused by the rules of this film. Two things: the fact that Orlando doesn't age, that kept on jumping out at me every time. It said 1650, 1700, 1750, and Orlando looks exactly the same. Everyone else looked different. That was jarring, and I thought, what's going on here? Is this symbolic? Is it fantasy? Is it literal? It was breaking my brain at a young age. But also, obviously, the big moment that changed everything, that I couldn't even remember what it was, but I remembered thinking this was fantastic and incredible, is that for a fair chunk of the film, around the first hour mark, I think, Orlando is Lord Orlando. And then there's this transformative scene where Orlando becomes a woman. And trust me, there is no doubt that Orlando is a woman. Tilda Swinton puts it all out there. And looking at it now, I can understand why I was completely confused, because I'd never seen anything like it. It challenged assumptions I didn't even realize that I had. And I just thought, I can remember now thinking that, okay, this actor really kind of looks feminine, but whatever. Like, who am I to judge? But then it all made sense to me when he becomes she, and it's brilliantly handled by Sally Potter. So look, gender, women, and society, they're really the things that leapt out at me as the themes in this one. They're underpinning this film. I'm sure there's lots of layers I'm missing. But what seems clear to me is that Sally Potter is definitely exploring how differently society treats people depending on gender. But Orlando stays as Orlando. They are still seeking love. They are still trying to work out how that works. But the rules change over 400 years, of course. Expectations and restrictions, even opportunities. And the film was really asking me, or what I got from it was that how much of our identity is shaped by ourselves and how much does society impose. I did enjoy the way that the film mocks the establishment, the poets and aristocrats and the intellectuals who think they know everything and espouse that all the time, get taken down by Orlando in a few critical scenes. There's some real mansplaining happening in this film. And it was great to see these guys get their comeuppance. And Orlando does it in quite a modern way, which I also found a little bit jarring but interesting. Tilda Swinton performs this as though, from the get-go really, as though it was modern times. It was 1992. The way she looks at the camera, breaks that fourth wall, turning and speaking directly to the camera was unnerving, and especially when it's so long ago, and everyone else stays in the time and in character, and the settings are so well done, and the costumes. There's no parody going on here. It just added a really modern quality to a period story. It just screamed to me that this is not a traditional historical drama, and the events and the plot definitely play that out. But you get the sense that Orlando's just sharing it with you like you're there with them. Princess Sasha, played by Charlotte Valandry, was interesting to me, because Orlando, when Orlando is still Lord Orlando, falls for the Russian princess immediately. And Princess Sasha just arrives like a vision and is like a breath of fresh air to these staid people in 1600. And the first thing I was struck by is how much Charlotte Valandry reminded me of Catherine Zeta-Jones. Same shape to a face, same sort of, I don't want to say pouting quality of her lips, but similar eyes, facial structure, and a classic movie star presence. and charisma. And I nearly had myself convinced that it was a very young Catherine Zeta-Jones. And anyway, when I looked up who the actress was and saw that it was someone called Charlotte Valandry, I realized that her life away from cinema was also pretty remarkable because sadly, she picked up HIV when she was 17 or 18, before this film was made, and later underwent some heart transplants and eventually passed away in her early 50s, like the age I am now. But apparently just kept on acting and writing. Couldn't get insured at times. So quite a sad story because she really could have, I think she really could have been a big international star. The costumes and the locations and the visual style are incredible in this film. Nearly unrivaled, I've got to say. The houses, the castles, the splendor, the landscapes, just the look. The look. A lot of time was spent on making sure these people weren't tanned. You know, they're all inside all the time. The candlelit interiors sort of reminded me of what Kubrick did with Barry Lyndon. That same obsessiveness with detail. Obviously, that's where the similarities end because Barry Lyndon's a much more linear structure and plot, and Orlando just completely plays with ideas of structure and time, and it's a lot more playful and dreamlike, philosophical for sure. Both show a lot of extraordinary attention to detail. Orlando's really making a lot more statements about society, I think, than Barry Lyndon. And look, I think I've said it on other pods, but films that deal with metaphysical ideas and philosophical concepts don't always resonate as strongly with me as other kinds of films. So I usually connect a lot more strongly with character-driven stories that hit me and that I can relate to. So this one's completely out of my, not my comfort zone, but outside of my experience. But it stayed with me, this film, in some shape or form. I knew that it was a brain breaker and that it was asking a lot of questions. And I know there's layers to this film that I didn't get down to because I was amazed at the look of it and Tilda Swinton's performance. I don't want to wade too much into whether this is a date film or not because then I'm getting into gender politics. But if you're into this sort of material, Virginia Woolf, Sally Potter, experimental cinema, there's probably a hell of a lot to talk about if you're both into that. Obviously, it's not your casual Friday night unwind movie, but yeah, it could well be a date film. Not sure it's a hangover film. It does a lot to your internal thought processes that your mind's probably recovering from just trying to remember what happened the night before. It is very beautiful to look at, though. You could just let it wash over you and fade in and out. Maybe it's definitely a watch alone film, a film to sit with and think about like I did, and then maybe do some research afterwards and find out more about it if that's what does it for you. Yeah, it's as you can see, I'm still struggling to kind of voice my thoughts on this one. But look, my final thoughts are that I'm amazed that I got through this film in my early 20s because I just would have been blown away and I would have been struggling on a few fronts. Didn't have the tools to fully understand it. I can broadly understand now what Sally Potter is exploring, and it is intriguing. But I'm not sure it's a film I'll return to. Definitely not regularly. Who knows? I might look at it in another 10 or 15 years and see what I think. But it's just not my kind of thing. A film that's laden, like I said, with metaphysical ideas and philosophical questions. I am glad I revisited it, though, because I always knew when this flashed up a few weeks ago, I thought, I'm going to have to rewatch this to see if I can work out what it was that dazzled me the first time round. It's genuinely unlike almost anything else I've seen. Challenging. Tilda Swinton is incredible, and she's gone on to have a great career. So I've got to respect that. It's a unique film experience. So yeah, it's definitely worth a look if any of these themes attract you, or if you just want to see a great performance in a film that looks incredible. Check it out. So that is Orlando from 1992. Thanks as always for listening, and see you next time.